So let's now see event propagation in practice, and mainly event bubbling. And we're going to do that by attaching event handlers to this navigation link here, and also all of its parent elements. Then as we click this link, we will give all these elements random background colors, and this will then allow us to visualize exactly how event bubbling is happening. And it will make sense once you see it actually working. And let's actually start by creating that random color that I just mentioned. And the random color is basically just a string like RGB, and then with a value between 0 and 255. So here with commas, actually. And so you see that VS Code is already showing this as a color. So let's start with the random number generator. And this one I will simply write now because we already did it in the previous section. So that's going to be math.floor. So maybe I could have just copied this code here, but then it would appear that this code simply magically appears, and I don't really like that when I'm watching a tutorial myself. Okay, so this was the formula that we used before to generate a random integer, and now we can use that to create a random color. So random color, and let's use another arrow function here. And so now we simply need to follow this formula here. So here we need random int, and as I said, with a value between 0 and 255. So this, and then 3 times. Okay, and that's it. Let's just check it out. 255. Oh, that's not what I wanted. And so you see that random colors keep appearing down there now. Okay, but now let's actually attach the event handlers that I was mentioning. So I want to attach an event handler to this link and then to the parent elements as well. So let's check our HTML. And so the link itself is the nav link. And then let's attach an event handler also to nav links. So that's going to be this entire header there. Let me actually show it to you here. So I'm going to use this link here. So you see it's appearing in blue up there. So this link, then this whole element, and then also this entire header here. So that's with the class of nav. So document.query selector. And here we are actually going to need the event. And then as always, just to see if it works. And it does. So let's now grab some of these others. So that's links and nav. Remember, so that's the 3 that we want to use here. And so anyone that we click now, we will see link. So for now, that doesn't really matter, because what I want to show you now is what happens when we assign a random background color to first starting with this one. So we can say this, and remember that in an event handler, the this keyword points always to the element on which that event handler is attached. So in this case, that's going to be this link. All right. So we say this dot style dot background color and set it equal to a random color. And for now, let's just get rid of these here just to see if this works. Oh, and now we see this is jumping around, and that's because of this hash there. So let me get rid of this for now. And this here as well. And now as we click, it reloads the page. So what we need here is this, I guess. And so yeah, now it works. And so as we click here, we see that the color of this element keeps changing. But now, what if we perform the exact same action on the parent element? So let's copy this and put it here. And again, keep in mind that this nav_links element is the parent of this link. So it's all of this block here. So when I click this link now here, what do you think is going to happen to the nav_links element? So to that whole container? Well, let's see. And you see that the container also got its own random background color. So based on what we learned in the last video, why do you think this is happening? Well, just as we learned before, the event actually happens at the document root, and from there it then travels down to the target element. And so in this case, that is this link. And then from there it bubbles up. And bubbling up means that basically it's as if the event had also happened in all of the parent elements. And so that is the reason why this exact event is now also being handled by this event listener here that is on nav_links. Okay? So again, it is as if the click event here on this link had also happened right here in this element. So in the nav_links element. All right? So both of these handlers here are now handling the same event which happened here on this link. And as we keep clicking, of course, the same keeps happening. Now, what do you think happens when we click only outside here? So only in the nav_links? Well, let's see. So you see that the color on the link itself keeps unchanged. And that's because this is the parent element. And so from here, the event only bubbles up to its parent elements. So let's see what happens when we actually also paste this here into this whole nav bar. So let's see. And indeed, now the click event that happened here was indeed handled in all three places. So in all three elements which have a click event handler. Great. But let's now dig a little bit deeper and talk about the event target. So here let me log to the console, first saying that this is the link, and then event.target. And the target is essentially where the event originated, so where the event first happened. So this is not the element on which the handler is actually attached. Okay? So again, this is where the event happened. So in this case, where the click happened. And it is not the element on which the event handler was attached. So let me put the same here also. And let's call this one here the container and the nav. Okay. And now watch what happens again when I click on this link. Okay, so one more time, all the three elements got a random background color. And you see that the target, which is this one here, is always the same. Okay, so in all three handlers, the target element will always be the same. And that's of course the element where the click first happened. And it appears in all the three handlers because all of them are essentially handling the exact same event. So this E here, so this event that each of them receives, is indeed the exact same event. And again, that is because of event bubbling. So the event originates here in this link, but then it bubbles up to its parent element, which is this one, and from there to its next parent element, and from there it will travel even further up in the DOM tree. And so we can then handle that event in all of the parent elements, and that is exactly what we did here. All right. Now, besides the target, there's actually also the current target. So let me log that here as well. And the current target is indeed the element on which the event handler is attached. So e.currentTarget, and here e.currentTarget. So if we do this now, then you will see that the current target is not the same. Well, in the link it is, of course, because that's where the event happened, and it's also where the handler is attached to. But then here it is, of course, the nav links, so the container, and here the whole navigation element. All right, and so you might have noticed that the current target is exactly the same as the this keyword, right? So the this keyword is also the one pointing to the element on which the event listener is attached to, so such as we used here. And all of this is important to know when you really want to gain a deep understanding of the DOM and how it works. So here you see we got indeed true. So the this keyword and event.currentTarget are going to be exactly the same in any event handler. Another thing that I wanted to show you is that we can actually stop the event propagation. So let me show that to you. Propagation. And so all we have to do is to simply call on the event stop propagation. And that's it. So when we try to do the same thing now, watch what happens. So now the two parent elements did not change their background colors, which means that the event never arrived at those elements, right? That's why they weren't handled there. And again, that is because we stopped the propagation right here, okay? And so the propagation phase then never happened for this event. And therefore, these events never reached this element and also not this element. All right? Now, in practice, that's usually not a good idea to stop propagation, but I still showed it to you here in case you really need it sometime. So stopping the event propagation like this can sometimes fix problems in very complex applications with many handlers for the same events. But in general, it's not really a good idea to stop the propagation of events. So as we just saw, these three event handlers that we set up here receive events from the target elements and also from the bubbling phase, right? So in other words, the event handler functions are listening for click events that happen on the element itself, like this, right? Or like this, and where now, of course, only the background color of this one changes. And they're also listening for events that keep bubbling up from their child elements. And that's the reason why the color changes in all of the parent elements here as well. So the two phases that I just described are phase 2 and phase 3 in the slide that we saw in the last video, right? But now, what about the capture phase? So that was phase 1. Well, as we learned, events are captured when they come down from the document root all the way to the target. But our event handlers are not picking up these events during the capture phase. Remember that? So I mentioned that add_event_listener here is only listening for events in the bubbling phase, but not in the capturing phase. So that is the default behavior of the add_event_listener method. And the reason for that is that the capturing phase is usually irrelevant for us. It's just not that useful. Now, on the other hand, the bubbling phase can be very useful for something called event delegation. So that's something that we're going to do in the next lecture. However, if we really do want to catch events during the capturing phase, we can define a third parameter in the add_event_listener function. So for example here, we can set the third parameter to true or false. And so let's set it to true. And so in this case, where this useCapture parameter is set to true, the event handler will no longer listen to bubbling events, but instead to capturing events. Now in practice, that's going to look the same here. Okay, but as we take a look here in our log, you will see that now the nav is actually the first appearing. And let's clear that here and see it again. So you see that now the first element through which the event passes is the navigation. And the reason for that is that this element is now actually listening for the event as it travels down from the DOM, while these other ones are listening for the event as it travels back up. And so that happens later, and therefore the nav is now the first one to show up, because this of course is the first one to happen. Because first the event travels down all the way to the target, and only then it bubbles back up. And so these other two event handlers here, they are looking for bubbling events, and so therefore they are going to happen after this first one. Now they're still all working with the same event, they're simply doing it in different phases of the event propagation. And if that sounds confusing, then please take another look at the slide that I showed you in the last video. You can imagine that slide maybe with these elements that we're working with here, and then picture the event traveling down and up again, and how we capture it here in the capturing phase. So with this flag here set to true. So I hope that made sense, but let's now actually get rid of this. So by default, this is set to false, and so getting rid of this is the same as setting this argument to false. So as I said, capturing is actually rarely used these days. And the only reason why both capturing and bubbling actually exist is only for historical reasons. So from the time where different browsers implemented different versions of JavaScript. But anyway, what really matters that you really understand here is that why these three boxes here get three different background colors, even though the click only happened on this element. And I think I made that really clear in this video and also in the last one.